I'm Rachel. Welcome to Recovery Daily. And today I wanted to talk about my stroke. So I could tell you actually what happened and fill in some of those gaps. And so I've mentioned that the stroke was 2 years ago. So it was June 4th, 2021. And what happened was I I had been working and I'm working at home and because of COVID, and I was taking my dog out to go to the bathroom. And so we walked out on the leash and I was talking to myself because that's what I do. I was just like whispering to myself and and all of a sudden what I was thinking in my head was not what was coming out of my mouth. And all of a sudden, I was like, like I realized all of a sudden that there was something wrong. Um, and so I'm so grateful that I was sober when it happened. So I had already been sober for 5 years. So I had just celebrated my fifth year of sobriety. So, because I don't think if I was drinking, there's no way I would have realized that something was wrong. I would have just gone to sleep probably. I'm guessing. So, anyway, so I came back inside and I walked in and my boyfriend at the same time he was like walking towards me. We were both coming up either side of the landing to meet each other. And I looked at him and I said, I can't talk. And he looked at me like I had three heads, of course. And I think he thought I was having a panic attack, which I've been known for. So he said he was in the middle of something for work. Something was he's does computer stuff. He's gonna laugh when I say that. But anyway, he was working and in a meeting or doing something. So my son was upstairs in the kitchen. So he said, "Why don't you go upstairs and talk to Tristan or something?" So I went up there and I said the same thing to my son. I said, "I can't talk." And so I just remember the panic in his face when I said that. And so I picked up a piece of paper and I tried to start reading it and I couldn't read the words. Like I knew what the words were saying. My brain knew what it said, but my mouth could not form the words. So he just about yelled at me and said that I needed to go to the hospital. So I started walking back down the stairs, and my boyfriend was coming back up, and I said, watch this, or something like that. And I tried to read the paper, and and again, I couldn't say the words on the paper. And so he said, we need to go to the hospital. So we got in the car and we went to the hospital. Now, I'm another thing, I'm very grateful that we had just moved to the area. So we moved from Charlestown, West Virginia, to Sterling, Virginia, and are now 15 minutes from Reston Hospital. So we got in the car. 15 minutes later, we're walking into the ER. I was trying to talk on the way to the hospital, and he told me to stop talking. I, I guess I was trying to prove to myself that I couldn't say the things that I was trying to say, but he just told me to stop talking. And so anyway, we went in, and the desk when you come into the ER, they said I kind of sat down because I just was, I don't know. I don't even know what was happening, but I just sat down in this chair beside the front desk, and he said she's having a hard time speaking or putting her words together or something like that. And so they took me right in, right to the back, and they laid me down on the table and started hooking stuff up to me. And I felt I wasn't scared. I actually felt very calm and peaceful, and I felt like there's nothing I can do right now. Like I learned in my program in sobriety, we can't control people, places, and things. Well, it's not like I made a conscious choice to be like, ah, yes, I'm something is wrong with me. I cannot control people, places, and things. I just realized that my life was in their hands. I honestly, I didn't know if my life was in danger or anything. I didn't know what was happening. I came to find out later that my boyfriend suspected that I was having a stroke. And so they there was a doctor in the ER. It was his last day. He was getting ready to retire. And he just so happened to be the guy. And so he was trying to get me to talk, and it seemed like he didn't think it was that bad or something like that. I think he was explaining what my options were, and the option was to get a clot buster if I was truly having a stroke and it was a clot. So, but he was very hesitant to uh, prescribe that kind of treatment unless it was obviously necessary. So I believe they wheeled me back to get an MRI, and they could tell that I was still having the stroke. So they wheeled me back into one of the ER rooms, and my boyfriend was there, and they wheeled in a Georgetown hospital specialist on a TV, and and he started talking to me, and the doctors in the room were he was telling them how to do tests, and so they were doing the tests to me while he was kind of commanding the room, and and they concluded I was in fact having a stroke. Now that might be confusing because I'm not quite sure what came first or second, the MRI. uh, I may have not had the MRI until after the clotbuster. I don't really know the order of things. It's kind of a blur to me. But I do remember him saying, yes, you need to get the you should get the clotbuster. I'm recommending you get the clotbuster, but it's only you make the decision. And so the same almost retired guy, really just seemed to not be a big proponent of that. I think he was just so the reason why is because uh, I think I remember him saying that there's an 8% chance that if you get the clot buster, that you're going to have a brain bleed. And so I remember thinking that at that point, I remember thinking, I'm trying to save my life. I didn't realize that until that moment when he said that was possible. And so I was terrified. And I looked at my boyfriend, and he looked back at me, and he just kind of nodded to me. Um, yes. And so we did it. And so they there were, like, as far as I remember, there were a few doctors in there, and they got me all set up to get the clot buster, and this was legit. There was one guy looking at the clock, there was another lady, you know, uh supporting him, and then another person over there getting ready to inject it. Like this was the real deal, and they were doing it uh like by the clock and stuff. It was very scary. And anyway, so they gave it to me, and so during this whole time the doctor's trying to keep me talking. And so he somehow I had, and I was very talkative because that's what I am. And so he said, I guess I had said something about having a dog or something, and he asked me what kind of dog I had, and I tried to say Weimaraner because that's what I have, and I could not say Weimaraner, and I think I may have mentioned that yesterday or the day before. And so, so that's what he decided. Number one, that I loved my Weimaraner, so I was excited to talk about it. And two, it was a word I could not say, so they were able to measure the success of the clot buster by over that hour. Um, they said after the hour I should be able to say Weimaraner again. And so sure enough, that's what happened. And so during this hour, they're doing all these tests on me, um, like just to make sure that if I was having a brain bleed, they would instantaneously know that that's what was happening and they could address that issue. Um, so uh, I didn't have a brain bleed. um, I ended up everything went just as it should have, and and I was able to start speaking more clearly. I It wasn't perfect. I was really challenged to say to say words here and there. I couldn't think of words. That was the biggest thing that I remember is I there were obvious words that I just couldn't think of, like table or, that kind of thing. A normal, everyday type word, I couldn't think of them. Um, Today, I still have that problem. I feel like I just can't think of words as fast as I used to. And I think I'm the only one who probably notices that. But I'm betting that my boyfriend notices it, but we haven't really talked about that. What he has noticed is that about 3 times a day, I've been counting, I can't I replace a word with another word. Um, like instead of orange, I'll say apple, and say instead of tennis court, I'll say golf course or something like that. And I won't even realize that I'm doing it. And it gets worse the more my head hurts, the worse it gets. So so back to the hospital, they put me in ICU. I never have a brain bleed. My kids get to come visit. Thankfully, I know they were very scared, and so they got to come in, and they talked to me. They noticed that my speech was a little slow, but it was really nice to have them come in, and I think they were uncomfortable. Obviously, they were in ICU, and they were visiting me, and there were doctors coming in. There's a speech therapist that comes in. There's a physical therapist that comes in, and they're trying to figure out what happen, like what like post stroke symptoms I'm going to have, what was damaged, what part of my brain was affected, um, and how is that going to impact uh, my physical well-being and all of that stuff. So the speech therapist said that my speech wasn't uh, affected to the degree that I needed to go to speech therapy. So that was good. All of my physical tests were fine. My face was, my both sides of my face were fine. All my muscles were working. appropriately. The only thing that I really had going on that really stood out was a headache. And I ended up getting admitted. I was in the hospital for 5 days. And throughout the time that I was there, not a lot happened. I was really just waiting for all the different doctors to come in and check me out. But the one thing that stood out was I had a headache. And I kept asking for headache medicine. And I remember this clearly. They were giving me Tylenol, and because that's what they give you in hospitals, they give you Tylenol, and it wasn't working. And so they just kept giving me Tylenol, and I'm like, this is not working. I need Advil or something. I need something other than Tylenol. And so I think they ended up giving me an Aleve or something like that. I believe that's what it was. And it didn't do anything. That I still had a headache, and I kept telling them, and so I just kept sleeping and waking up. I In the 5 days that I was in that hospital room, I never turned the TV on. Um, and it's not that I knew something was wrong with my eyes. It's just that my head hurt. And I really had no desire to turn any lights on or turn the TV on or open the window shade or anything like that because my head was bothering me. And so my recovery, my sobriety recovery was starting to kind of whisper in the back of my mind, ask for a Percocet, ask for a Percocet. Don't ask for a Percocet. That's not good. Don't ask for a Percocet. I really want a Percocet. And so I'm having this internal battle, and I knew that I wanted a Percocet for the wrong reason. Even though my head hurt, I think I wanted a Percocet because I wanted my head to stop hurting, but I also remember abusing Percocets in college when I was drinking, and I loved it. And so I was hoping that I could kill two birds. I could feel good and I could get rid of the pain. And so anyway, so I just wanted to mention that. I'll come back to that. So nothing ended up working. I just had a headache for 5 days. And the the doctors that I had to wait for the 5 days were I saw a neurologist, I saw a oncologist, a cardiologist, and a vascular surgeon. And this was all to, figure out it's like the need to figure out what happened to me started. So they are, checking my cholesterol. They're asking me, do you have any um did your parents have a stroke? Did your mom have heart problems? Does your dad have AFib? Does your all of these things? And so, I can name a couple things. My grandmother had a stroke, but she was 80 something when she had a stroke. Um, my brother has AFib, but I think he had a little bit of a heart skipping thing going on when we were younger. But anyway, nothing life threatening that I really could share other than my grandmother had a stroke. And so there was really no obvious signs as to why I had the stroke. So they they started we what's the word I'm trying to say? Like they started like weeding things out as to why I could have had the stroke. So they just start eliminating things. So they took me off of birth control, and they put me on a heart monitor for a month, and I got a transesophageal echocardiogram, and because there's a possibility that I had a hole in my heart. So I'll explain that. So um, I got the COVID vaccine. Some of you may have been like, ah, of course it goes back to the COVID vaccine. But I got a COVID vaccine, and then the next day I had a colonoscopy. I think it was the next day. And I ended up getting a clot in my arm from the uh, the IV when I had the sorry, I'm having a hard time remembering words here. When I had the sorry, um colonoscopy. Sorry, see, this is the thing that happens. So, that clot in my arm ended up moving up my arm, and my whole arm was in so much pain that I ended up a few days later, or a couple days later, going to the ER because I thought something was really wrong with my arm. And so it turns out they told me to put a heating pad on it. There was nothing they could do. So I did that, and it it kind of started subsiding. I can't really remember. And then then I got my second vaccine, COVID vaccine, and 4 days later I had the stroke. So they thought that it's a possibility that the clot in my arm, because it was right up in my shoulder at that point. It had started out at my elbow, and it was up in my arm. It was kind of all in there. And they thought that maybe it could have, if it was in a main vein, that it could have traveled through a hole in my heart and reached my brain. And so I learned that everybody has a hole in their heart when they're born, and most people, the hole closes. And but there is a percentage of people whose the hole remains. And so if I were to have a clot in a main vein in my arm, then it's possible that it would travel through the hole in my heart and up to my brain. I don't have a hole in my heart. So the only explanation that I can possibly provide you is that I got a clot in my arm from the first COVID vaccine, and I got a clot in my brain from the second COVID vaccine. That's the only possible explanation as to why I had my stroke. Now, I have gone to all of these doctors that I just mentioned to you, and the the neurologist, uh, actually, I don't want to call all of them, will not admit that it was from the COVID vaccine. All of them. And I talked to my family doctor about that, and she, you know, same thing. It's all a legal thing, you know. Nobody wants to admit anything. Nobody wants to say why I had a stroke. And it's just fascinating to me. But I'm going to move on because that's what I've done in life. I've moved on from that because it's not about why I had the stroke anymore. It's about the headaches. So I still have the headaches. And so I ended up going on short-term disability because I couldn't function with the headaches. And I noticed that when I was on any digital device, that's when it was the worst. to the point where I could not look at my phone. Like I could not look at a digital device. And so I went on short-term disability. I started doing a little like I would work like 10 or 15 minutes. I would try to be on the computer, and then I would have to take about a 2-hour break to make my head and my brain relax and stop being so tight and feel this aching feeling. Um, and then I would work again for another like 15 minutes, and then I would have to take this 2-hour break. So this is what I did for months. This is what I did. And then I slowly was able to start working um, for a half an hour at a time, and then an hour at a time, um, and then I got to the point where my short-term disability was over, and my head still hurt. But so I started applying for long-term disability, but I thought I don't I I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't Short-term disability is a pain in the ass. And so because you're you have to go through the doctors, you're going through the insurance company, you're going through your, finance department, and although everybody was magically wonderful for me. I mean, they really were. Everybody was super supportive, other than the doctors. Uh, in a lot of ways, the doctors were very frustrating to me, but I know that they're doing their best. Um, so anyway, I didn't want to deal with long-term disability. I didn't want to deal with all of that shit again. So I decided I'm just gonna start working full time again. And I'm just gonna get up at 6:30 in the morning and go to sleep at 9 o'clock at night. And I'm gonna work and take breaks and work and take breaks and fit my 8 hours in there. And that's what I did. And I've been doing that for, so I guess it's about a year and a half because I was on short-term disability for 3 months. So almost 2 years I've been doing that. And I have gotten to the point where I can't even look at a digital device for 15 minutes. So I had gotten to the point where I built back up to be able to work for an hour at a time, 2 hours at a time. I even was making myself work 8-hour days, and I would just take little breaks like a normal person. And I think there was something, I just wanted to be normal. I love my job. I love feeling like I'm needed. I love being creative. I love having projects and completing them. I love exceeding people's expectations. I love ideas, and I love making things turn from an idea into reality. And so I wanted to work. And so over the past 6 months, I was really, really fortunate. I was given the opportunity to get something started at work that folks have been wanting to do for a few years now. It's just an online learning center for users of our platforms to be able to do on-demand learning. And this is something that several uh, folks have wanted to do, and there was like turnover in the department and stuff, and so it just never got done. And so it wasn't really in my lane. But I did it. I wanted to do it because I knew it was possible and it was going to be not terribly difficult. So I wanted to do it, but what it did require was a lot of my time. And so I worked not only my 8 hours, but not probably, I know I was working 11, 12-hour days at times. And so I've done this to myself, honestly. I thought that if I forced myself to be normal, I would be normal, and I'm not. And so I think what I've done is imagine you broke your ankle and you you sit around for however long it takes to heal a broken ankle, and then you get back up, and the first day that they tell you that you're allowed that you can walk without a boot or anything like that, you start walking 2 miles a day. And then a year later, you start running and you never stop. There's no way that that ankle is going to be able to keep up. The ankle broke unless you got some kind of physical therapy. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know anything about broken ankles, but you know what I'm trying to say. So, I think that I think I've realized that what I went through actually was a big deal. That sounds really weird, but I was talking to a friend today and I said, I never really admitted that what happened was a big deal. I just had a headache. And, people kept telling me, you need to take care of yourself. You got to put yourself first. You need to rest. Rachel, rest. Stop working so hard. Stop. You don't need to do that. We can do it for you. And I just didn't listen. I really just didn't think that it was a big deal. And what I shared yesterday about that moment, um, a couple days ago, 3 days ago, that moment that I realized that something has to change and it has to change now, um, I realized that it's a big deal. What happened to me is a big deal. And everybody's stroke is different. And I feel lucky that you can't see it. Like, I feel lucky that I can just, you know, go around town, or, well, I can't go around town because I can't get in the car and drive anywhere. But if I were to be out in public, like, nobody can see that anything happened to me. Nobody can see that I had a stroke. And I guess that's a good thing. But is it? Because I can't go anywhere. I can't without feeling like shit. I can't go anywhere. I can't drive. I can't ride in the car. I can't ride a bike. I can't, you know, we went to Home Goods yesterday, and we were looking around, my boyfriend and I, we were looking around for fancy new stuff for the house, and I just love Home Goods. And so usually when I walk in there, my eyes are like all over the place. It's like it's like it's like I'm frantic, trying to take it all in and, oh, that's cool, that's cool. And I got to touch everything and I'm just looking all over the place. And so I walked in there and I started looking around and it took not even 15 seconds. I was looking around, my eyes were just like traveling all over, looking at all the fancy, shiny stuff. And I was like, ugh, I can't do this. So I methodically started walking down a home goods aisle, looking at one side of the aisle, one shelf at a time. And I just walked slowly. And then I turned around at the end of the aisle and looked at the other side of the aisle and walked back. And it was fine, but it's certainly not as exciting as you know, it's like going to Disney World and you're not allowed to look around. You just have to you get led to one ride at a time. Here, you can now get on this ride. And so it's just I don't know. That's a little of me feeling sorry for myself. But so here we are. So that's what happened. And I a couple of the treatments that were offered to me were my neurologist tried to provide me with migraine medication because I was telling him I have headaches. And it's not a headache. I don't know if I've explained this yet. The headache is not like a headache where you take Advil and it goes away. It's like there's different degrees of it, and it starts with uh like a small ache in the upper left side of my head. And then if I continue to be exposed to whatever in my environment is causing that sensation in my head, it will start feeling like my whole head, I explained yesterday, right through the center, all the way around my head. It feels like there's uh, a stack of rubber bands being tightened around my head, inside my head, and somebody's just cranking it. Like one of those stretch tables, just cranking it, stretching it, and stretching it. And then if I continue to be exposed to the environment that's causing that, I will start to feel nauseous. And then after that, I'll start having sharp pains in my head. And so I've started to really be able to articulate it a little better, because before it was like I just kept saying it's a headache, my headache, and so he gave me migraine medicine. It didn't do anything, just like the Tylenol in the hospital didn't do anything. And so I stopped going to the neurologist because when I went back to him and I said it didn't do anything, he said, "Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater." And so he said he increased the medication, and and it still didn't do anything. So I stopped going, which I know is not the correct solution, but I was frustrated. So I stopped going and I went back to my family doctor. And I explained to her what was happening because I went to I went on a business trip and really had a tough time. I rode in an Uber and looking around the airport. We went to go visit the SEALs in San Diego, and standing out like in front of the ocean and watching all the waves and the seals and stuff was, oh, it was terrible. It hurts my head even thinking about it. And I explained that all to her, and she said that this sounds very much like what my daughter experienced when she got a concussion. And so I thought that was interesting. So she said that her daughter ended up going to vision therapy. She went to a neuro optometrist. And so she recommended that I go. So that's what I did. And so I went a little bit. I went for a couple months, and it's interesting what they do. It's kind of like I kind of felt like I was in preschool, and I just got to play games. I got to play different games that caused me to have to um, decipher what I'm looking at and solve problems and test the convergence and divergence of my eyes and things like that. So I ended up going, and it wasn't a terrible experience, but I couldn't drive myself there, so I stopped going. And again, that was not the right answer, but I was still in this I'm a normal person uh, kick. And so I stopped going to that. And so um, today I have an appointment tomorrow with a new vision therapist, and my boyfriend's going to drive me. And so that's tomorrow afternoon. And tomorrow morning, I have an appointment with my family doctor. I'm going to explain to her what's going on, and I'm going to request that I go back on short-term disability. And I'm going back to vision therapy. And my brother actually suggested uh, ketamine infusion, ketamine infusions. And so I'm going to look into it. I'm going to ask my doctor about it. I'm going to um, go have a consultation with somebody and see what they think about that. And so we'll see. I'm going to learn a little bit about that. And so that's where I'm at. And I just really wanted to share my story of what actually happened to me. And so one thing that I didn't finish on my story, and then I'll wrap up, is the Percocet issue. So what ended up happening with the Percocets, they did not give me any Percocets in the hospital, but I managed to convince the doctor that was assigned to me in the hospital to prescribe me some Percocets. I didn't say give me Percocets. She said ha maybe we should try Percocets. And I thought this isn't a good idea, but I said, yes, let's do that. So she was not concerned with the fact that I did mention that I'm an alcoholic, and I was concerned that I could get addicted. And she said, well, I'm only going to give you five or something like that. So I thought, oh, what's the harm in that? So I came home and I took one, and I did not get the sensation that I did when I was in college and I was drinking beers and I would have my Percocets. So that was a bummer. And what it did do is it relieved my head because it put me into a nice deep sleep. That's all that happened. It did not make the pain go away, because that's not the kind of headache I have. It just put me asleep so, you know, contently, I suppose, that my I was able to escape the pain for a little bit. And so what's interesting is I talked about this in my AA meeting, and I know that AA is an anonymous program, and I was wondering if that was going to slip out of my mouth during during this podcast, but I suppose it's fine. I'm only talking about myself, so it's fine. But I was talking about how I wanted the Percocets and so on and so forth, and how it's really unfortunate that when you take the Percocets for the right reason, it doesn't give you the pleasure that it does when you take them for the wrong reason. So I I don't by any means consider myself to have slipped by taking drugs or anything like that. I ended up throwing away the rest of the Percocet. So, all is well. And that was 2 years ago, and I really have not revisited that idea to take Percocets or anything like that. But a lot of times, when people who are in recovery go through these types of physical, illnesses or accidents and stuff like that, we are challenged by having to make the decision or have a caregiver help us take the drugs that are prescribed to us in the way that they are prescribed. And another example of that is I went to a periodontist and I was offered laughing gas for the periodontist appointment, and I declined. And I actually called my sponsor from the dentist chair and said, the periodontist excused themselves for a minute, and I told her that um, I had the opportunity to have laughing gas, and I wanted it, and that made me nervous. That made me think that I shouldn't have it. And she said that it was up to me, whether I take it or not, but think about what your goal is. What is your intention? Is your intention to feel good from it, or is your intention to make sure that you don't hurt? Are you afraid of the pain, or is there another way to relieve the pain? And I said, well, they can just numb my mouth. And so the periodontist came, I got off of the phone with my sponsor, and the periodontist came back in, and I said, I would prefer if you did not give me laughing gas and you just numbed my mouth. And so that's what happened. And unfortunately, there was one part of my mouth that did not numb during that periodontist appointment, and that sucked. But I did the right thing, and I'm super proud of that. So anyway, this was a long one, but hopefully I have now told my story. So if anybody wants to know what happened to the action in the whole stroke thing that happened to me, I've got it all recorded now. So there you have it. And I am off to sleep and to my doctor's appointments tomorrow. So I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.